Welcome to my channel, Tina Brigitini here, and I just want to thank you for being here. A practitioner once came to me looking discouraged. She said, Tina, I think my client is getting worse. I asked, tell me what happened. And she explained that her client had finally begun sleeping better. Their anxiety had noticeably decreased. They were setting healthier boundaries. Everything seemed to be moving in the right direction. And then, without any warning, old grief resurfaced. Memories that they hadn't thought about in years came flooding back. Practitioner looked at me and said, I thought we already dealt with that. And I smiled because moments like this often become some of the most important lessons in a practitioner's journey. Healing doesn't unfold in a neat, predictable order, at least what we had hoped for. It doesn't usually move in a straight line. And when we expect it to, we sometimes mistake progress for problems. So today I'd like to explore why healing is often far more intelligent than it first appears. I think many of us quietly imagine healing as a staircase. Step one, step two, step three, eventually we arrive. Real life doesn't usually look like that. Healing often feels more like a spiral. We revisit familiar themes, but not from the same place. The grief feels different. The fear feels different. The relationships feel different. We're not back where we started. We're returning to greater capacity. And that distinction matters. See, one of the questions I hear most often is, why did this come back? And I gently remind people, maybe it didn't come back. Maybe it's revealing itself differently because the system now has enough capacity to meet it. So think about that. What if healing isn't uncovering something because you failed? What if it's revealing the next layers because you've grown? And that's what changes everything. So imagine renovating an old home. You replace the windows, and while doing that, you discover water damage that's behind the walls. Did replacing the windows create the damage? Of course not, right? It revealed something that couldn't be seen before. So healing often works the same way. As one part of the system becomes more organized, another area finally has enough support to emerge. This isn't regression, it's progression. In many healing traditions, transformation has often been described as unfolding in stages rather than all at once. See, modern psychology also recognizes that change is rarely linear. Growth often involves periods of consolidation, renewed challenges, and continued adaptation. Although these perspectives use different language, they both remind us that healing is a process, not a straight path from problem to solution. And as practitioners, remembering this can help us to respond with patience rather than discouragement. Now, this understanding changed the way that I respond when a client tells me, I thought I was past this. Instead of assuming that something has gone wrong, I become curious. Has something new become available? Has the client's capacity expanded? Is the system inviting us to explore something that wasn't accessible before? Those questions create hope without minimizing the client's experience. So this week in our energy therapy certification course, one of our students shared a case that beautifully illustrated this principle. Her client had finally begun speaking up in relationships. A week later, unexpected sadness appeared. And at first she worried that the work had unraveled. Then she realized something. The sadness wasn't replacing the progress. The progress had created enough safety for the sadness to finally be felt. And that realization completely changed how she understood the session. These are exactly the kinds of conversations that we have every week inside of our live certification. Not simply what happened, but how to interpret it through the lens of lasting healing. So if there's one idea I'd like you to remember, it's this: healing doesn't always move forward in a straight line. Sometimes it moves deeper. And as practitioners, our role isn't to force the journey into some predictable sequence. It's to recognize that intelligence of the process unfolding is in front of us. In our next chapter, we're going to explore one of the biggest reasons practitioners become overwhelmed and the difference between holding space and carrying your clients. Because compassion doesn't require absorbing another person's suffering. In fact, understanding that difference may be one of the greatest forms of self-care a practitioner can learn. So thank you again for joining me for another chapter of the Architecture of Healing. And to everyone joining these conversations from around the world, I thank you. This community continues to grow because of thoughtful practitioners like you who are willing to question old assumptions and learn from one another. Thank you for helping to shape this into a truly global dialogue about healing. I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever watched a client or yourself feel discouraged because an old pattern resurfaced? Looking back, did you eventually realize it wasn't a setback, but another step in the process? Share your experience below. These conversations are one of my favorite parts of this community. Until next time, take good care of yourself. And remember, the healing isn't about becoming someone else. It's about understanding how we became who we are and creating the conditions for something new to emerge. So many blessings. I'll see you in the next video. Tina Brigitini.